Hey, what's up? This is Andrew from meanbard.com, bringing you the latest and greatest in the groovy world of JavaScript. Every week, I'm going to be picking something cool in the JavaScript world and provide real-world examples by coding it alongside with you. So this week, we have the top 5 rookie mistakes that React developers make when starting out. So without further ado, let's get into the text editor and start coding. Alright, so as you can see, I've initialized a React application by running npm create React app. This is just a simple way created by our friends at Facebook to quickly and simply get up and running with a React application. So it says to get started, edit app.js in the source directory, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'll switch over to my text editor, and here we are in app.js. I'm going to get rid of the little template that they provided here. And we'll get rid of our logo that we're importing up top. We don't really need that. I'll save that and switch back to browser, and I should get a blank page. I do. Fantastic. Alright, the very first React sin that we're going to be looking at today is starting your component name with a lowercase letter. So all components have to start with an uppercase letter, otherwise React will actually attempt to render that component as a built-in element, like an h1 or a div or a span. So we definitely don't want that to happen, and to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a class-based component, and we'll call it Hello World in camel case. We'll have a render function, and it's just going to return a simple h1. It's going to say, hello, world. Awesome. I'll be sure to call that down in our app component. I'll save that, and let's see what happens in the browser. Oh boy, we still have a blank page. What is going on? Let's check out our developer tools. The tag hello world is unrecognized in this browser. If you meant to render a React component, start its name with an uppercase letter. So that's exactly what we thought would happen. React is trying to render that component as a built-in element, and of course the browser has no element called hello world. So this is a very simple fix. We're just going to start it with a capital H. Hello world with a capital H. Save it. Let's switch back. And look at that, we get our hello world rendered nicely. The second issue we're going to look at today is confusing template literals with regular strings. So a lot of folks will attempt to interpolate variables inside of a single quote string instead of defining a template literal with backticks. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a property on our hello world component. We're going to call it species. Earthlings. And we're going to create a super simple template that will render in our hello world component. So I need to define that logic inside our render function since this is a class-based component. And we're going to say const species equals this.props.species. We'll grab that from the properties. And our greeting is going to be hello species. And instead of saying hello world down here, we're just going to render our greeting. Now, make sure I close that. Now keep in mind that I did define this as a regular string with single quotes. I did not use backticks, and I'm trying to interpolate a variable here. So let's see what happens when I save it and go over to the browser. I get hello $species. So if we wanted to use a regular string, we could concatenate by doing this, hello, comma, close the string. We'll add a space there, plus the variable species, plus an exclamation point, and we'll save that. And that works just fine, but since we're using ECMAScript 6 here, we want to interpolate it inside of a template literal. It just looks prettier. So I'm going to define a template literal using backticks, and we'll say hello $species. Close that out with a backtick. Switch back to the browser, and look at that, we get hello Earthlings, just like we should. So that's another thing to keep in mind is don't confuse template literals defined by backticks with a regular string, which is defined by a single quote, or you could define a regular string with double quotes, but a lot of folks get the single quotes and backticks mixed up. Cool. The third common problem we're going to be looking at is confusing functional components with class-based components. So in React, there are two kinds of components, functional and class components. Our hello world component up here is a class component. And when I say I call a component down here, that's exactly what we're doing. We're calling a function. In this case, it is the render function on our hello world class. Class is essentially an object, and our render function is what's being called down here. But we can also write a component as a functional component. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now by creating a functional component. We'll say const hello Mars, and we're going to pass it props as a parameter. And we're going to actually have the same exact logic in here that we have for our hello world component. So we're going to say const species equals props.species. Notice I didn't use the this keyword, and I don't need to use the this keyword because we're passing props in as a parameter. It's essentially a variable on our function. We'll say const greeting equals hello species, just like our hello world component. And then I'm going to return h1, and we'll pass it greeting. And keep in mind that we're returning JSX here, so that's why I include the curly braces around my variable. All right, awesome. So let's create a hello Mars component down here. We'll call it, rather. And we'll say species equals Martians. Awesome, so we'll save that and head over to the browser. Look at that, I get hello Earthlings and hello Martians. So the main takeaway from this is I can't take this logic in our hello world component and stick it just anywhere, because this is a class. It's essentially an object. So the render function is a method on our object. So if I save this and head over to the browser, I'm going to get a compile error on runtime. So obviously I can't just declare logic anywhere inside an object. That makes absolutely no sense. But with a functional component, I can, because it's a function. We run our logic, and then we return from our function that little snippet of JSX. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're using React, is know the difference between functional and class components. There are advantages and disadvantages to both of those, and know what to use and when. Alright, the fourth common issue we're going to look at is passing numbers into properties on a component as a string instead of a number. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and we'll see why it can be a problem in just a second. For right now, I'm going to get rid of our Hello Mars component, and we'll get rid of it down here. And we'll keep this component named Hello World, but the functionality is going to be a little bit different. We'll just keep it named that for simplicity. Instead of species as a property, I'm just going to say random digit, and we'll pass in a string. It's going to be 21. And up here, let's define a little bit of logic. So let's say let number equals this dot props dot random digit. And from our random digit, I want to calculate the meaning of life. And everybody knows the meaning of life is 42. So let's say const meaning of life equals number, which is our random digit, plus 21. And down here in our h1, let's return meaning of life, and we'll pass in the meaning of life variable. Alright, so we're passing in 21 as a random digit, and 21 plus 21 is 42, right? So in our browser, we should say meaning of life is 42. Oh no, we get meaning of life 2121. That's not correct. So what's going on here? Well, it's pretty obvious. We're passing in a string instead of a number on our property. So what React and JavaScript is trying to do is concatenate our number string with the actual number 21. So this is actually a really easy fix, and if you're defining numbers on properties, never define them as a string. Wrap them in curly braces. 21. So now random digit is actually a number and not the string 21. So up here it's actually going to perform math correctly on it. I'm going to save it and go back to the browser. And there we go. The meaning of life, the universe, and everything is 42, just as it should be. And the fifth and final common React mistake is confusing parentheses with curly braces. And I find this happens a lot in the render function on class-based components. So to demonstrate this, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to rewrite our app component. We'll say class app extends component. We'll have our render method. And we're going to return our hello world component, but instead I'm going to make the mistake of returning that with curly braces there. So I'm going to say hello world random digit equals 21. And you can see I'm getting some syntax error highlighting in the editor there, but we're going to ignore that for right now. I'm going to save that and pop back over to the browser. And I'm getting a compilation error. So what React is trying to do here is trying to return an object, because render is a method, and you return, just like any function in JavaScript, you return the data that you calculated from your method or your function. So right here, React and JavaScript is trying to return an object, and that makes no sense because there's JSX in here. So again, just by using parentheses there instead of curly braces, you're not trying to return an object, you're trying to return the actual component, the JSX component that you've defined. So that's another common issue to be aware of and look out for. Alright, I hope you enjoyed looking at those examples. Be sure to leave a comment and hit the subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Until next time, take care.